You know, there's a good chance you're being watched right now. Not by a person, but by this invisible, automated network that's woven into our cities, our airports, even our workplaces. This is the world of modern surveillance, a system that's getting more powerful every single day. To really get our heads around its scale and what it means for us, we're going to break down a new report from the research firm Virtualization Options LLC. It's designed specifically for leaders who aren't in technical roles, so we're going to cut through the jargon and get to what matters.
Here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll ask just how big is this surveillance network really? Then, we'll look at the key technologies that make it all tick. After that, we'll dive into the real-world impact on people and our rights. And finally, we'll look ahead at that huge question: how do we possibly balance security with our personal freedoms?
So let's start with the sheer scale of this. Honestly, the first number we're going to look at really tells a story all on its own. Get this. According to the report, there were over 770 million surveillance cameras operating across the globe back in 2022. And that number is not standing still. It's expected to grow by about 15% every single year. This has gone way beyond a simple security measure. It's basically a piece of global infrastructure now. And this isn't just happening in one part of the world. Yeah, the Asia-Pacific region has the most, but look at Europe and North America. We're talking hundreds of millions of cameras combined. The big takeaway here is that it doesn't matter where you are. This digital eye is fast becoming a permanent part of the landscape.
But you know, the number of cameras is really only half the story. The real change, the seismic shift, isn't just about recording footage anymore. It's about using sophisticated software to analyze it, to identify faces, to track our movements, and even to try and predict behavior. That analytical engine, that's the true game changer.
So what are these technologies that make up this modern toolkit? Let's peel back the layers and look at the key tools that are actually doing all this work.
Okay, first up is the one you've probably heard the most about: facial recognition. This is the tech that can literally pick you out of a crowd by analyzing your unique facial structure and then checking it against massive databases, all happening in less than a second. And this technology really presents a sharp divide. On one hand, you have some incredibly powerful uses, right? Things like law enforcement, border control, finding missing people. But on the other hand, it raises these huge flashing red lights about mass surveillance, data security, and the potential chipping away of our basic civil liberties.
Next up in the toolkit, automated license plate readers, or ALPRs for short. You can just picture them: high-speed cameras, maybe mounted on police cars or streetlights, that are constantly snapping photos and logging every single license plate that drives by.
The power here is incredible. The ability to track a vehicle in real time, building this huge database of where a car was and when. But that immediately creates a major privacy clash. A detailed, searchable history of your movements, all put together without you ever knowing it's happening.
And then we add another dimension. Literally. Drone surveillance. These UAVs give authorities a literal eye in the sky, able to watch everything from traffic jams to public protests from high above, gathering data over huge areas with ease.
And finally, there's this idea of predictive policing, which tries to tie all this data together. The process sounds straightforward enough. You gather up historical crime data, feed it into an AI to predict future hotspots, and then you send police patrols to those areas. But this is highly controversial because critics point out pretty forcefully that these algorithms can just end up reflecting or even amplifying the biases that already existed in the original data.
So, that's the scale and the technology. But what does all of this constant watching actually mean for us as people? Let's shift our focus now to the human consequences.
This quote from the report really nails a central concern, what's called the chilling effect. Think about it. When we know we might be watched, do we start to change our behavior? Do we think twice about joining a protest or attending a certain meeting or even just speaking our minds freely? This idea of self-censorship is a huge deal.
And what's really crucial to understand is that the weight of all this surveillance isn't shared equally. The report finds that these technologies often have a disproportionate impact on marginalized communities. We're talking about people of color, activists, and low-income groups, which can lead to unfair scrutiny and even be used to suppress dissent.
When you boil it all down, what's really on the line here are some of the most fundamental rights that are supposed to be the bedrock of a free society. Our right to privacy, our right to assemble peacefully, and our right to express ourselves without looking over our shoulder.
So this brings us to the big finale. What's the path forward? How do we even begin to navigate this incredibly complex new world? The report frames it perfectly as a critical balancing act.
This lays out that central conflict just perfectly. On one side, you've got security. the goal of keeping the public safe, of preventing crime. But on the other side, you have privacy, the need to protect our individual freedoms, to protect our right to speak, and to guard against discrimination. Finding the sweet spot between these two, that's the billion-dollar question.
So what's the engine driving all of this forward? Well, you probably guessed it. Money. The global data economy is projected to be worth over $1.2 trillion by 2025. An amount like that creates a massive financial incentive to collect as much data as humanly possible from both our online activity and from these physical surveillance systems. And in response to all this, we're starting to see this patchwork of rules and regulations pop up. You can see all the different types here: broad laws in Europe, state-level acts in the US, specific laws for surveillance, internal company policies. But the reality is, these are all just the first attempts to write a rulebook for a game that's already well underway. So how do we actually move forward in a responsible way? The report argues it boils down to 3 principles that are absolutely non-negotiable. First, transparency, so we actually know what's being used and why. Second, accountability, so there are real consequences for misuse. And finally, public oversight, to give people a real say in how they're being monitored.
Which leaves us with one final and I think really profound question. In a world that is so bent on connecting, monitoring, and analyzing everything, how do we protect what might be the most important human right of the 21st century, the right to simply be disconnected, unobserved, and free?